Now, we know that the managing director of the Tema Oil Refinery, Asante Bekon, we're told, has been charged by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission for arranging payment for the government of Ghana and some legislators in Ghana's parliament and between the years of 2015 and 2016. Now, Mr. Bekon's move was to gain approval, according to the U.S. authorities, for a client power plant project and its approval, according to court documents cited here. Now, the Tema Oil Refinery board's role as a former executive of Goldman Sachs, but its branch or office in the UK was to develop investment banking business for the subsidiary and the holding company. Mr. Bekon subsequently, in response to allegations which have received wide media coverage across Ghana, the rest of the African continent, and especially the world, with Bloomberg, CNN, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, all of them posting these publications, widely circulated online, claims that all these are said to be false. But let me just run by you. It indicates that he's said to have schemed to facilitate bribe payments to government officials. We're talking about $66,000 to members of parliament, and subsequently pocketed $2 million between the years in reference, 2015 and 2016. And it says that to effect the corrupt scheme, Mr. Bekon arranged for the energy company to funnel between $3 million and $4.5 million to a Ghana-based company referred to by the U.S. courts as the intermediary company, to bribe various government officials responsible for approving the power plant projects. Now, the energy company transferred up to about $4.5 million, it is believed, to the intermediary company, all of which was used to bribe, according to the U.S. authorities, the Ghanaian government officials. It added that Mr. Bekon crafted, developed, and carried out the bribery scheme with the knowledge or under circumstances that made it substantially certain that all or a portion of the money set to paid to the intermediary company will be paid as bribes to Ghanaian government officials to secure support for the power plant projects. And he said, for example, about April 13, 2015, Mr. Bekon learned that the energy company and the Ministry of Power of Ghana, herein referred to as the Ministry of Power, had reached an agreement in principle on the terms of the power purchase agreement. And by April 20, 2015, at the request of the intermediary company, Mr. Bekon, who is now the managing director of the Tema Oil Refinery, and the energy company had arranged for the energy company to transfer $500,000 to the intermediary company, which the intermediary company then used to bribe a senior government official. And the U.S. court referred to this, according to the reports, as we have cited, to be government official one, who represented the Ministry of Power during the negotiations with the energy company. Now, B, on May 11, 2015, the energy company and the Ministry of Power of Ghana signed the power purchase agreement. And on May 19, 2015, the intermediary company sent an invoice to the energy company for an additional $1.5 million in funds for the bribe scheme. On May 22, 2015, the energy company again transferred some $1.5 million to the intermediary company, all or part of which was used or to be used to bribe Ghanaian government officials. It determined that Mr. Bekon knew of this transfer at all or soon after the time of the transfer. Now, 2 months later, on July 17, 2015, the Ghanaian Parliament, Ghana's Parliament, ratified the power purchase agreement. On July 20, 2015, the intermediary company requested through Mr. Bekon that the energy company send it another $1.5 million for its next crucial steps. That court determined that Those funds were to be used to bribe Ghanaian government officials and to advance the bribery scheme. D. On August 4, 2015, the intermediary company again emailed another invoice to the energy company, copying Mr. Beku for $250,000 for the bribery scheme. Another $250,000 on October 19, 2015 to the bank account of an employee of the intermediary company was also sent subsequently. Mr. Beku also helped the intermediary company pay smaller bribes, totaling approximately $210,000 to various other government officials involved in the power plant project. And these include bribes to a Ghanaian government official designated in this report as Government Official 2. And we're being told that this Government Official 2 assisted Government Official 1 on the project, employees at the Ministry of Power who provided confidential information to the intermediary company concerning the project. But subsequently, it moves, and you know that the agreement, according to this report, as a result of information obtained during federal investigations by August 2016, the subsidiary terminated its involvement in the project. But between September 2016 and February 2017, the energy company paid Mr. Beku in total $2 million for his efforts in the facilitation of these transactions. And by December 7, 2016, the day when Ghana voted, Mr. Beku tendered in his resignation to the subsidiary, which became final on about. But we have some responses from Mr. Beku. We will run that by you as well. Before we go to Mr. Edem Senanu, the anti-graft campaigner. And subsequently, he has responded, refuting all these allegations and also releasing statements indicating that the Security and Exchange Commission's claim in that report are all false, and that he was in no way involved in payment of so-called bribes, and subsequently absolves himself of any blame. He did indicate in the statement that he had given his own version based on a question and answer session that took place with the officials and the team that was investigating from the American Security and Exchange Commission. Well, we'll tell you more about this, but this also speaks volumes or smacks of some concerns of corruption. And what a way for us to have Mr. Edem Senanu streaming through. Mr. Edem Senanu, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
And I'm sure you followed the report, you've read through, and then the responses of Mr. Asante Beku. What do you make of this in the first place?
Well, it's shocking, it's embarrassing, and the reputational damage to our country is just so immense. Coming on the back of several other similar incidents, this is not looking good at all. One would assume that the U.S. will not do this kind of thing lightly. And therefore, I think that the government of Ghana needs to sit up and to think through whether Mr. Asante Beku should still be in this pole position at a point when we ought to investigate and establish what has happened.
But we do know that he's come out with a statement. And when you read the statement, he categorically denies having personally paid any forms of bribes at all, or become the vehicle through whom payments were made, whether to Ghanaian officials, a government official 1 or a government official 2, and subsequently members of Parliament of Ghana.
Well, as you know, in issues like this, it's not so much whether you were directly caught transferring these sums of money. Aiding and abetting such things is bad enough. And the report suggests that the email trail, the communication that they have assessed, shows that it was knowledgeable or part of the process of requesting for these sums of money. For what purposes will have to be established. because if it's a normal procurement process, then why would you require such huge sums for next critical steps, etc.?
And then I'll read through his statement. He says the chronology of event material to the transaction as follows. The PPA was negotiated and executed between February and April 2015. It received the approval of Parliament in July 2015. Besides the funds the Turkish IPP was to raise to execute the transaction, the government of Ghana was also to raise liquidity support and a continuance of what the letter of credit should be in the sum of some $72 million to enable the transaction to reach a certain conclusion. But he says, my fees were paid in tranches. The first being 500,000, he agrees, and then the rest in 2016 and 2017 after I had resigned. Alongside this transaction, I worked on another transaction in Goldman Sachs prior to my resignation. It says, my role after Goldman Sachs had pulled out was exclusively limited and restricted to advising in raising the liquidity support required for the transaction. I also advised the Turkish IBP in the procurement of a $250 million finance from a bank. I state categorically that I have not paid any bribes to government officials, members of parliament, or any officials of parliament. Is it not a dog calling? Is it not a cat calling a dog a bad name in the first place?
Well, until we investigate the issues thoroughly, there may be some aspects that are on our blind side, which will provide clarity. For example, the documentation I've cited states that in his contract with Goldman Sachs, he was required to have transparency on any other payment, and indeed to reject such payments, especially if they related clients. So if he himself admits that he had $500,000 paid as fees whilst he was still in the employment and engagement of Goldman Sachs, it already raises issues of conflict of interest. And to what extent and purpose were those monies paid?
But he had been transacted by, he had been hired by Goldman Sachs, and subsequently after they had pulled out of that transaction, because of the knowledge he had, he still provided consultancy services. Any logical person would assume that as a professional, you just do your work. How is it that somebody who perhaps is based in London and could commute between countries or among countries could be responsible for payment of bribes to public officials who have been elected into public office, i.e. representing their constituents in the Parliament of Ghana, and so will be culpable for all that?
Well, you see, the thing is that if the correspondence shows that he facilitated the movement of money from the Turkish company to an intermediary in Ghana, and the procurement process, as well as understood, did not require at those stages that money should transfer hands, that already raises red flags. So it is in understanding the stages, at what point monies were transferred, for what purposes, whether he was legitimately entitled to the sums that he is calling as fees whilst in the employment of Goldman Sachs, whether it not conflict with his role as someone who should have given expert advice that this is something that the government of Ghana would approve of without necessarily having to use any sums of money. These are issues that will have to be interrogated.
I go to the page, official page of Mr. Kukuaza, the professor, the U.S. professor in law, and he states categorically, he says, unlike the poor guy who got remanded for stealing cocoa yams, you will not see Mr. Santebeko, current TOR MD, remanded for his role in facilitating the bribe payments to government, including my 66,000 to our MPs, while he pocketed a $2 million for his role in the illegal scheme. Now, he raises a question: what due diligence was made before his appointment? What has that got to do with appointing somebody into the office of a state corporation?
Well, the standard process for taking on board new staff typically involves cross-checking references as well as places of work. You would assume that the head of HR would call and check, well, we are interested in this former employees of, and what are your comments? So a reference check is a standard process in appointing people. And I think he asks a very legitimate question when he points this out, that what kind of due diligence was.
What would
because the likelihood would be that Goldman Sachs would have indicated that we broke up on terms that were not the very best in terms of integrity.
Well, now that all this is out, what do you expect the government of Ghana to do, or the appointing of authority of Mr. Bekun to do? Hello, sir. Well, try and reach him back due to difficulties with technology. But again, we'll run by you the statements of Mr. Asante Bekun, and we'll put that on the screens for you shortly. But in the meantime, please make sure that you get interactive. We have Facebook, JoyNews on TV, and then also let us also hear from you as you get interactive on Facebook and then also on Twitter. In the meantime, if you get interactive, let us know what you think about all these developments, and also we'll get to know what the official authorities in government should be doing. When we get Mr. Senanu on the line, because officials of state have been mentioned in all these transactions, we have members of parliament advisedly also alleged to have received bribes within the period. What is the responsibility of Parliament, the Speaker, rest of management of Parliament, and what actions thereof can they take